The accident is only minutes away. Meanwhile, the sludge at the bottom of the tank continues to generate gas in the intense tropical heat. After tea, the chief officer and the fitter go back on deck to complete the welding. Only one of them will survive the next few critical minutes.
What actually caused the fire in the tank, we're assuming, was some sludge or scale in the upper portion of the tank where they were welding. Caught fire, detached itself and fell to the bottom of the tank where it hit the flammable vapors. The crew, when we interviewed them, they reported after starting the welding a whooshing noise, which was a large intake of air into the tank.
The explosion is horrendous. Both center tanks 5 and 6 are torn apart with tremendous force. At the management office in Dubai, a short but disturbing phone call is received.
We had a call from SUNDA master, and he was very disturbed and not so clear.
Yeah, tell me, where is the fire? There is fire on the SUNDA. There is fire on the deck.
I heard that. I walked out of the room and the fleet manager was coming towards me, and he said, this is what the master said, and we continued on to our emergency room. That's where we normally meet when we have an emergency situation. That's all we know now.
Frontline, the owner, is also notified of the accident. In their emergency room, the emergency team meet to lead Frontline's part of the rescue operation. As the fire raged after the explosion, the problems continued. The crew's ability to put out the escalating fire was minimized.
Nobody had put on the firefighting suits, so they were trying to fight this raging fire, but they didn't have the protection of the fireproof suits, which limited how close they could get to the flames. They saw that the fire was extremely big, fighting it was difficult. Risk of an explosion, best to get as far away as possible.
I understand there's a large ball of fire, but do we know from where this fire has started, or in which tanks this fire is?
Then the master called again sometime later, and he said he was a little more detailed than he was before, and at that point in time he also said that it will lead to a situation where he will have to abandon the ship, because he was afraid there was an explosion in way of number 5 tank, number 6 tank. And he was afraid there could be a second and a third one, and for fear of lives on board, he said he's taking a decision to abandon the ship.
Before leaving the vessel, the captain counted crew members and came up one short. The fitter was nowhere to be found. So they abandoned ship, hoping to find him in the sea nearby.
The chances were that he was thrown overboard in the way the damage occurred. So then the next attempt was to see if he could be spotted anywhere in the water in the close vicinity. But the lifeboat went around, and as much as they could search, nothing much could come out of it. We didn't really find him.
Frontline called their man in Singapore to see if he could get on board in an attempt to control the ship. It was drifting dangerously close to oil field installations.
I received a phone call from Oslo explaining that the front SUNDA had had an explosion on board. It was decided to get on board as soon as possible. As you approached the vessel, you could see there was a huge explosion. You could see the cranes were bent, the deck was lifted up, you could see sections of the side of the hull were charred, and the steel plate had actually buckled with the heat under a large area of the side of the ship. By the time we got on board, the fire had actually burnt itself out, and the crew had actually left fire hoses running and water on deck, so the vessel was cool and had burnt out. The force of the explosion was unbelievable to see firsthand. And it was also quite a frightening feeling to be on the ship. You knew there was a lot of structural damage. You knew that one crew member was missing. And we really didn't know what had happened. So to be the only person on board, it's quite an experience. One you don't want to do again, that's for sure.
The front SUNDA catastrophe was the result of several breaches of safety barriers. So how do we explain that nobody spoke up when safety was at stake? Both on the aircrafts in Tenerife and on board the front SUNDA, crew members witnessed that a colleague had breached a vital safety barrier. Nevertheless, they lost courage or their ability to react. And that loss of courage led to loss of life.
We have to start with the top management on board the vessels. The captain and the rest of the top officers really have to emphasize the importance of speaking up on an everyday basis, and they have to reward it very positively and very visibly when someone does speak up, even if the topic they spoke up about was not important at all.
Communication is the most important factor. We need people to speak up, to communicate, to work together. And that's the only possibility we have to achieve our target, which is to make Frontline the safest fleet in the world.
There's no doubt that safety is on everybody's lips, especially the big oil companies. We have already seen it. The way they look into how ships are managed, how the ships are crewed, vetting of the owner's office. There's much more focus on this. So for us to remain number one tank owner in the world, we will have to follow the same standard, and that's what we have been implementing over the last years, and we're doing even more now.
This reconstruction is filmed on board Front SUNDA's sister ship, and the personnel that appear in the film were not involved in the actual accident.